You know, one thing I learned during COVID is like a lot of people have cowbells at home. I was like, where did everyone get the cowbell? You can hear them. All right, ready? Can I say it? Action. Wait, do I say action? I forgot. Hey everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I'm gonna show you a recipe out of my new cookbook, Dessert Person. It is soft and crispy focaccia, and it is one of my favorites in the book. This focaccia is not only easy, but it's so impressive. You have this incredibly crispy, delicious, like olive oily bottom, this crunchy top with flaky salt, and this super soft, holy interior, and I think will make you feel like you're this incredible bread baker when maybe you're still a novice, because it really over delivers with the end result. So this is my book, Dessert Person, and you might be wondering, as my editor and many other people were when I told them I wanted to call the book Dessert Person, why do you have savory recipes in the book? To me, Dessert Person is a state of mind and it's an attitude. There are savory recipes in it because I really want people to know that baking isn't just about dessert or sweets. It can be dinner, it can be lots of different things. So I have a whole chapter on savory baking, and one of my favorite recipes is this focaccia. There's basically like no meal for which focaccia is not a welcome accompaniment, especially now that we're getting into colder weather, like soups and stew weather. It's just so delicious and it keeps forever. It's the perfect bread. There was one time I ate like the entire sheet tray over the course of 5 days and wrapped it in, like finally was like, I'm done with it. I threw it in the trash and then I fished it out of the trash to finish eating it because it was so good. I was like, it's wrapped in plastic. It didn't touch any of the other garbage. It's fine. And I was with my mom and then we toasted it and ate it. This recipe is very straightforward. You do need a couple pieces of special equipment. So I'm using a stand mixer, a scale, a thermometer. This is kind of optional. But very importantly, a half sheet tray with specific dimensions. And then ingredients, also very straightforward. We got flour, water, salt, yeast, and olive oil, and that's it. Because there's so few ingredients, use a good quality flour, and this is bread flour. It's kind of a funny thing to be cooking from the book. So I might be making slight changes because I'm thinking like, why did I do it that way? Sorry. Active dry yeast is the most common kind of yeast you'll find at the grocery store. It's like little yeast granules that are covered in a dehydrated coating. So most recipes that use active dry yeast will tell you to do something called proof the yeast. And that is just to guarantee that the yeast is alive and it will raise your bread. And I'm gonna dissolve the yeast in a half a cup of warm water. Just make sure that the water is not scalding. You do not want it to be hot because that can kill the yeast. Now the reason I say to use the thermometer is just so you can be certain. All right, so we're at 100 Fahrenheit, that's close enough. So I'm whisking the yeast into some warm water to get it to dissolve. So I'm gonna let that sit for 5 minutes or so. So in order to really tell if your yeast is alive, you'll see some kind of like swelling, but just not a lot of really active bubbling. So I know that this yeast is alive. I'm gonna proceed. I have room temp water. I'm gonna add 2.5 more cups. This is 6 cups of bread flour. I went ahead and weighed it, and my kosher salt, and turn on the mixer. I'm gonna start on low. All I wanna do initially is incorporate the flour in the water. So I'm gonna turn up the speed a little bit. Now that all the flour is hydrated, that's when you can increase the speed. Okay, so I wanna mix this for about 5 minutes until the dough is smooth and starting to wrap around the hook. These are cheap and I like to use them instead of plastic wrap for covering stuff, so I just dampened it. I don't want anything in the bowl to dry out. So I'm just covering the bowl like so. And I'm gonna let this rest for about 10 minutes. And then when I mix it again, it's gonna be much easier kind of to develop the gluten and get to that end point. So now, after 10 minutes, I'm gonna turn the mixer back on. Everything just stays inside. And I'm gonna keep mixing on medium-high until I start to see the dough pull away from the sides. So I'm gonna let this go. I'm looking for the dough to be extremely smooth and extremely elastic and to have a little bit more of its own shape. This will take like 10 to 15 minutes. I mean, you're at a much greater risk of underworking it versus overworking it, so it's very unlikely that you're gonna work this too much. It's not really sticking to the sides, so we are ready to go. So you can see this is like so elastic. Anything that you're making with active dry yeast will almost always tell you to do 2 rises. A 1/4 cup of olive oil goes in. I am swirling it to coat the sides. There's a lot of olive oil in this recipe, and it's really what's giving the focaccia its flavor. So try to use a good olive oil, definitely something extra virgin. You know, first cold press, look for all those words, that kind of thing. Now, one quick thing, I want this to rise, and I want to make sure that the dough isn't stuck to the sides of the bowl in any place. So I just take my scraper or my spatula, or even just your hands, and I'm just kind of working around the dough to make sure that it's loose. And then with your hand, dab a little bit of oil around the surface. And then with that same towel, just throw a cover on it. It will basically double in size and become super bubbly and airy. And that, depending on the temperature of your kitchen, will take like 1 to 1.5, maybe even 2 hours on a cold day. Oh, bad kitty, bad kitty, bad kitty. Felix, get down, get down, get down. So I did this one in a glass bowl, and you can really see there's all this bubbling around the sides. This is the poke test. This is a test you can use basically when you're doing anything with yeast. When I poke, the dough springs back, and that's an indication of how much gas is in it, but leaves a very slight indentation. So now I'm gonna generously oil the half sheet tray just as I did the bowl with the remaining 1/4 cup of olive oil. Now before I transfer the dough, I do a series of folds or stretches to the dough. And this is a technique that you see a lot like in sourdough or artisan bread making. I'm gonna go down around the sides and lift it up, like give it a little wiggle, then give the bowl a 90-degree turn. Hands go down and around so that you're really getting underneath the dough and lifting it up. And then do a couple more of those so you're really going around the bowl 4 times and just turn it 90 degrees each time. Also just like look at the surface, like you can see all the gases and all the bubbles underneath. Always go to the indicator and not the time. Like the time is a suggestion. The time reflects how long it took me in my kitchen when I was making the recipe, but it could be so different for people at home. So always go to the indicator, meaning like the doubled in size part, the poke test, rather than the time. So I'm gonna stretch the dough as much as I can to fill up the sheet tray, but it's gonna be a little stubborn and springy. Which is okay. So stretch it as much as you can. And then when it starts to really spring back, that's when we need to let it rest so that the gluten can relax and we can finish stretching it. So I think this is like all it's gonna really do before it just contracts. If you see any really big bubbles like that, you can go ahead and pop them. So this has to get covered. And this time I'm gonna use plastic because the dough is so sticky at this stage and anything that's on the surface is gonna touch it. So I just don't want it to stick. And to that end, I'm gonna oil it. So I have like oil left in this bowl. So the gluten needs about 10 minutes to relax, so I'll come back and finish stretching it. And it's looking great. This photo in the book shows all of the options that I give. You could put anything you want on top of this focaccia. The one I'm gonna be making is very simple. It's just garlic and rosemary, very classic. So I dedicated the book to my mom because, well, for a lot of reasons. And one of them is that I took a sabbatical, which was the word that I used, but really it meant I moved in with my parents for a month. And my mom helped me work on the book. I was like behind on my deadlines and just really needed to focus. So my mom and I just like cooked every day. And we had all these ants in the house. So my mom called an exterminator and the exterminator came by and I was working on the cookies chapter and we had like 10 different kinds of cookies all out in the kitchen and the exterminator like took a look at the ants and then took a look at the cookies and was like, well, you have a problem and the kind of ants that you have are attracted to sweets. So basically I felt like I gave my parents an ant infestation because of all the baking that I was doing. And then we gave him so many cookies and he took them all home. What I love about using rosemary on the top is that it kind of like fries in the olive oil, and I just love the flavor of fried rosemary. 1/4 cup of olive oil, let it sit, kind of infuse. And just because I have them right here and I feel like it'll add some red pepper flakes. I'm gonna carefully peel back the plastic because I'm gonna reuse it and just finish stretching it into all the corners. And you can see that in a half sheet tray with 1-inch sides. It comes up about halfway. We are going to cover this again and let it rise until the focaccia is basically flush with the very top of the pan. All right, so this one was chilled, and then I took it out of the fridge to let it finish its rise. You can see it's right up to the top of the pan. If you have the time, let it sit overnight. Like, good things happen. It like ferments slowly, it develops better flavor, and you'll have, I think, a better whole structure. Okay, this step is called dimpling the dough. I love this part because it is like the inner child in me comes out and I'm like playing in Play-Doh. It's just so satisfying and tactile, and you can like really get your hands in there. So I'm actually just dipping my hands in the little pools of oil around the sides. So get your hands all oiled. And now I'm going to use my fingertips and like hold my hands like little claw, or like I'm playing the piano, and basically just go push all the way down to the bottom of the pan and make these big dimples. So this is kind of like strategically deflating some of the air bubbles so that you get this flat focaccia rather than kind of a big domed, like loafy kind of thing. Even if I didn't like eating focaccia, I would probably still make it just so I could do this part and like get in there. So now I'm gonna use my spoon to just drizzle this topping over it. So my oven is preheating to 450. We bake this really, really hot. And I have a rack on the very bottom and then a rack on the very top. And I'm gonna talk about why. But that basically will help me to achieve a crispy bottom and also a really brown, golden, beautiful, crispy top. And now the last thing is a little flaky salt on top. This is really just to give it a little crunch and bring out the flavor of the garlic and rosemary and all that. So this is gonna go on the bottom rack first. It is hot in this kitchen with this oven on 450. How hot do you think it is in here? Do you think it's 85 degrees in here? Wait, I have an idea. Holy shit, it says 87 Fahrenheit. Whew. So the bread is starting to pull away from the corners of the pan, and I can tell it's nicely brown, and I just want to get more browning on the surface rather than the bottom. So now it's gonna go onto the upper rack. Ooh. All right, and then all that heat from the top of the oven will focus on the surface, and that will make this beautiful crispy top layer. All right, so I think maybe another 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll take it out, unmold it. Don't look at that one. Don't look at that one. That one overproofed. Only look there. It's gonna be right there, okay? Don't look at that one. I don't have enough places to hide stuff in this kitchen. What's that cat doing right there? Look at his whiskers. Isn't he handsome? I think you can cut now. I think you're good. So it's done. I know it's done because I looked, but I also know because I smelled it. I am just going to loosen the focaccia with this is a really good tool for this. It's a fish spatula. You could use any flexible spatula. This is just to make sure it didn't get sticky anywhere. So I devised that kind of system of baking on the very bottom and then moving to the top because when I was testing this recipe at the beginning, I was just baking it in the center of the oven, and depending on, you know, like the recipe or whatever, like sometimes I just wouldn't get enough browning on the bottom, but like I just wanted it to be crispy. I like to cut focaccia with scissors because it's so big, and like this is just a super easy way to get my little bite-sized piece. I titled the recipe Soft and Crispy Focaccia because you got this super crispy bottom and then this soft interior, crispy on the top. I think it really lives up to its recipe name. This recipe stays good for a remarkably long time. It's so much fun to make. You just get to like play with really fun dough. And I think that it is a great recipe for people who want to get more familiar with bread making, working with yeast and all that. And then you have this just incredibly impressive, delicious product at the end. And also you have a lot of it. So great thing to share, freeze, eat all week. And thank you so much for watching our first video from my book Dessert Person. There's so much more to come. The book is just filled with recipes that I can't wait to show you. So yeah, I'm so excited that we're all here together. Come here, kitty. Come here. What do you think? What do you think of the focaccia? Hey everyone, I'm Claire. Thank you so much for watching. I really love being able to reach everyone at home again and show you recipes from Dessert Person. I want to take a moment to highlight the work of another Penguin Random House author and a book that I love. It is this one by Hawa Hassan called In Bibi's Kitchen. And Hawa's book highlights the recipes, stories, and histories of grandmothers from 8 East African countries all around the Indian Ocean. And it is a gorgeous book filled with history and narrative and of course delicious recipes, many of them vegan and vegetarian. I really enjoyed reading it. I like to read it like a novel, but it has some wonderful recipes that you will love. And I think will be a great introduction for many into the food of East Africa. So check it out. It's called In Bibi's Kitchen. Thanks for watching. You know where to buy it. You know where to buy books. Books are easy to find.